Earlier this week, I spent about an hour in the Indigo bookstore just up the street from where I live. That UCW gift card is burning a hole in my pocket. I followed my usual trajectory in a bookstore. Cookbooks first, mainly to look at the pictures. The mystery section next to see if Elizabeth George has written another 800-page novel. And finally, the religion section. Although, of course, it's not called the religion section anymore. I think it's called ideas and opinions or something like that. Because, of course, nobody's religious anymore. They're all spiritual. So I looked over the offerings in this ideas and opinions section of the bookstore, and these are some of the titles that I see. Power Thoughts. New Day, New Year. Become a Better You. You were born for this. And Eat the Cookie, Buy the Shoes. And I realized, faced with these shelves full of spiritual books, that I must be the least spiritual person in the world. And I get paid to be spiritual. You know, sometimes I think you should fire me, but it's kind of too late for that, isn't it? I'm reminded of a friend of mine who, whenever we get together, is always excited about the newest book, always excited about the latest guru or spiritual practice, like it's the best thing since sliced bread. When we go into a bookstore together, my friend, who is a non-practicing, secular, agnostic, lapsed Jew, heads straight for the spirituality section, and I, the minister, head for the cookbooks. But you know, to be honest, I have absolutely no interest in any of these books. I confess to you that much of what passes for spirituality and spiritual practice these days just seems so self-centered and inward-looking to me. It's all about how I can feel more centered, how I can feel more focused, how I can be more calm and at peace with myself, with never a word about what I'm called to do in the world, to work for change, to work for justice, to seek transformation and growth, not just for myself, but for the whole world. I really don't get it, but then whether I get it or not doesn't matter. What matters is that there is a significant spiritual hunger and it longs to be fed. There is obviously a market for these books, and I'm pretty sure that the authors of these books are a lot richer than I am. So when did this trend start? Well, it's at least 30 years ago, because I remember when the book, and you may remember this as well, when the book, The Celestine Prophecy, came out, and that was in the mid-90s. And I remember Tom Harper, an Anglican priest who wrote an ethics column for the Toronto Star, reflecting on the runaway success of this book. And he acknowledged that some attack the book as being simplistic, dismissing it as a collage of trendy, new age nonsense. But in the meantime, the ordinary reading public was buying the book by the thousands. You'd think that some of the people who ridicule the book would stop for at least a moment, Harper wrote, and try to analyze its appeal. Why does this allegedly hopeless book have such an extraordinary appeal to ordinary people? And the question is especially relevant for religious institutions, he said, like the church. You'd expect that they, that's us, would be supremely curious to discover why a book like the Celestine Prophecy and other books like it communicates so powerfully with so many people when they themselves can't seem to put their message across. And Harper then suggests some reasons for the book's striking success. The author, James Redfield, has correctly recognized the unprecedented, massive spiritual yearning taking place in our culture. And for a whole host of reasons, which we could probably list, many people are turned off by conventional religion. And yet at the same time, they sense their need for a depth dimension to living as never before. Science and technology have delivered amazing wonders to our world, but still people say, along with Peggy Lee from last Sunday, there's got to be more to life than this. The Celestine Prophecy unashamedly addresses itself to this reality. Many of you will be familiar with the name Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. And people like Viktor Frankl have reminded us that we are meaning-seeking animals. The key to much of the stress being experienced on all sides today lies in this pervasive feeling that so many have, that everything is happening so fast and we don't have control over anything, and that the basic meaning of their lives has been eroded away. The Celestine Prophecy and other books like it are compelling because they so powerfully affirm that there is a purpose to every life beyond merely existing from day to day. People want power for living, and these books hold out hope to so many people because they argue that such power is available to all. And they all address the same issue in slightly different ways: the search for meaning, the search for purpose, for abundant life. Which brings us to the final verse of today's gospel reading from the Gospel of John, where Jesus concludes his address to the disciples by saying, "I came that they may have life and have life abundantly." Now, such a statement as this has no small appeal to our minds and our imaginations as we try to picture what abundant life might look like. And we're not lacking in images for abundance from the world in which we live: beautiful homes, expensive cars, the best to eat and drink, and winter vacations in the sun. And I, of all people, will never put those things down because, as you probably know, I love those finer things of life: good food, good wine, and a winter holiday in a tropical place. But the abundant life of which Jesus speaks is much more than that. It begins with the soul within us, and then it reaches out to embrace, to use, to enjoy, and to sanctify all of the material gifts that are ours. The religion of the Jewish people was and is grounded in the belief that this world, being created by a good God, is in itself essentially good. This world is good. That is, in terms of God's intention for the world and its people, and in terms of the world's potential. It's a very earthly and a very earthy vision of life. And although that's been part of our tradition as well, the Christian tradition, what seems to have happened over the years in Christianity has been a separation a separation of the material and the spiritual, a separation of this worldliness and otherworldliness, a separation of the body and the soul. It's called dualism, and we have the Greeks to thank for that. And the implication of dualism is always that the spiritual, the otherworldly, the soul, that these things are always good, and that the material things of life, the material things of this world, the body, and all of that are always evil and bad, to the point where we've been made to feel guilty if we have too much fun, if we enjoy the material things that life offers, if we take pleasure in our bodies. There's a story of an old Dutch preacher, probably about my age, who served two congregations in Holland, and the congregations were on opposite sides of a dike. And the only way he could get to both churches on winter Sunday mornings was to skate across the frozen water that separated the two churches. When he asked his church elders for permission to do so, they reluctantly agreed that he could skate from one church to the other, but only on the condition that he not enjoy himself while he did it. That is called religion without grace. The notion that God does not want or intend for us to enjoy the material abundance with which we are gifted. Too often we've allowed the church and religion in general to rob our faith of the delighting in God, of the enjoyment of God's grace and abundant goodness. Another name that you might recognize is the name Douglas Hall. Douglas Hall is a retired, actually I'm not sure if he's still living, a retired United Church minister. He was a professor of Christian theology at McGill University in Montreal. And to many of us in the United Church, one of the wise elders of the United Church. In his book, Christian Mission, The Stewardship of Life in the Kingdom of Death, he holds up abundant life as the goal of all of our Christian mission. And he writes of the importance of vision to human existence, referring to the famous Martin Luther King, "I have a dream" speech, and to the words of the Hebrew book Proverbs, "Without a vision, the people perish." But visions, he says, real visions are born in the night, in the darkness of human life. And so looking once again to our Jewish roots, in the midst of oppression, exile, and defeat, the prophets of Israel always reminded their people of their foundational vision, that life was always a matter of resurrection from death. From the deadness of despair arose hope. From the deadness of guilt came forgiveness. From the deadness of slavery came freedom. From the deadness of defeat came courage. In answer to the question, what is life? What is this abundant life that is the goal of our mission? Hall answers, it is a matter of vision. It's the courage to envisage the coming to pass of things that are not yet present. It's the courage given to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to believe that death and darkness are not the goal and do not have the final word. It's the refusal to believe that injustice, war, and sickness are simply inevitable. Life is the insatiable sense that we were intended for an abundance of being that is not to be confused with an abundance of having. And neither is this vision of abundant life only an otherworldly vision. It will not permit itself to dissolve into pure pie in the sky by and by spirituality. Martin Luther King, to go back to that example, Martin Luther King had a dream, yes, but that dream was not content to wait for a heavenly liberation about which so many of the old spirituals sang. A physical, this worldly, here and now, literal liberation was also necessary. The dream, the vision looks to tomorrow, but not to an indefinite tomorrow. The vision is for abundant life in the here and now. It is a worldly vision bent on expressing itself today. God is creating everything new now. And the new world that God is creating in the midst of the old has everything to do with the very concrete longings of the human spirit, those longings that were expressed so eloquently by the Hebrew prophets in our Old Testament. The longing that children should live and be healthy and grow to old age. The longing that the marginalized and the oppressed should have a voice and a place to call home now. The longing for peace, for enough to eat and drink, for happy and meaningful lives, not in the future, but today. I have another story. There was a pogrom, perhaps the great pogrom of 1848. And all of the Jews in the community had been killed, all except for one. He was taken before the Tsar. "Well," said the ruler of all of Russia, "you seem to be a bright enough fellow. And so, to show you that we Russians are not an uncivilized people, I am going to give you the choice as to how you are to die." "Ah," said the young man, "I thank you sincerely, and to show you that I am aware of the highly civilized nature of your state, as well as to save you and your people a great deal of trouble, I choose to die of old age." This world, for all of its pain and ambiguity, has within it a potential for abundance. Jesus often spoke of things like that in the Gospels of our faith, of the sick being healed, of the lame walking, of prisoners being released from prison, the naked clothed, the poor hearing the liberating word of truth. And again, these are not to be reserved for the future. They are possible even now. Abundant life is daring to think that what we dream for the earth and for our lives in it could become a reality. Not because we're such fantastic human beings, but because God, through us, is creating a new earth and a new heaven. And we are called to be stewards of God's work in this world. The goal of our mission is no more or no less than this: to participate in God's mission to help creation to discover and realize the abundant life that is being offered in the midst of all of this pain and death. And so abundant life is the goal of our stewardship and our mission. There are no limits to the quality of life that is suggested by that word, abundance. There are no limits to love, for example. There are no limits to justice or peace. These are resources that are infinitely renewable. No amount of time or space can ever deplete the abundant life that God has to give, and of which God makes us stewards. Stewards not only of our time and our talents and our money, which surely contribute to what Jesus calls abundant life, but stewards also of the love, the justice, and the peace to which we are also called. The wonder, the miracle is that we are called to participate in abundant life today and to share it now, to be its stewards in this time and in this place. The abundant life for which we long, for which the whole of creation groans, begins here and now. And so we choose life. Our Jewish sisters and brothers have a beautiful phrase in Hebrew that all of us might well take into our vocabulary. L'chaim means to life. It's a toast to life, a salute to the incredible miracle of being alive in this world. It's a word which recognizes the goodness of life, rejoices in it, and affirms it in a celebratory and appreciative way. So let's make a toast to life, to abundant life, life lived to its fullest, lived with enthusiasm and hope and joy. L'chaim. And thanks be to God.